alumni and guests, welcome to the College of New Rochelle. Thank you all for being here. My name is Adrienne Wald. I am the Director of Wellness Education at the college, and I'm also proud to coach the cross-country team. We are so pleased to offer tonight's very special lecture to conclude our second annual Fitness for Life Day at the College of New Rochelle, a day devoted to learning about wellness and positive health behaviors, as well as fitness. We are so fortunate to have Kathrine Switzer, a pioneer for women's athletic opportunities and a fabulous role model, here tonight to speak with us. Dr. Amy Bass, Associate Professor of History and Director of the Honors Program in the College of New Rochelle School of Arts and Sciences, as well as author of the book, Not the Triumph but the Struggle, the 1968 Olympics and the Making of the Black Athlete, will now introduce our guest speaker. Dr. Bass?
Thank you, Adrienne, and welcome, everyone. The Los Angeles Olympic Games in 1984 were significant for many reasons. The memorable opening ceremony, the record-breaking performances of Carl Lewis, the Eastern Bloc boycott, the smile that accompanied Mary Lou Retton's achievements, and the stunning finish by Joan Benoit-Samuelson in the inaugural Women's Olympic Marathon. Yes, that's right. Women did not compete in the marathon in the Olympic Games until 1984. When tonight's speaker ran the Boston Marathon in 1967, she laid the groundwork to fix a problem in sports that had festered for well over a century. Women did not compete in the first modern Olympics, 1896, but competed in Paris in 1900 in tennis, golf, and equestrian events. Despite success in track and field events beginning in Amsterdam in 1928, American women had to contend with images of femininity that constrained not just their abilities, but their very rights to compete on equal playing fields. Mythologies regarding the impact of sports, particularly those requiring stamina, such as distance running, on women crystallized in the 19th century, when physicians emphasized the need for women to focus their attention, physical and intellectual, merely on human reproduction, a woman's real responsibility, with only moderate physical engagement encouraged to maintain good health. A woman's body was considered to be a closed system, with only limited vital energy. If a young woman overexerted her body, there would not be enough of this vital energy left to lead a healthy reproductive life. Women, then, have historically been understood as athletes in terms of their physical incapacities, with a direct correlation made between a woman's perceived frail physical state and weak social position. In the 1960s, a time characterized by wide-ranging social movements, these perceptions began to change. In an era that sports commentator Jim McKay once described as a 10-year explosion of sport, walls of all sorts began to come down, demonstrating that what an athlete does on the track, on the field, on the road, or on the court can have a vast impact on history writ large. Sports, then, serve as a stage with the potential for tremendous power, one literally, physically focused on human possibility. It is with such tremendous pleasure that I introduce to you someone who exemplifies this, whether her feet are pounding the pavement or circling the globe. Kathrine Switzer.
42 years ago, the race director of the Boston Marathon ran out at the 2-mile mark on this course, tackled me, screamed at me, "Get the hell out of my race and give me those numbers," and tried to rip the bib numbers off the front of my sweatshirt. It was an event that changed my life, and consequently, it was an event that changed the lives of millions of women and men, too, around the world, and in an odd way, in ways you may not realize, the lives of everybody in this room. I'm going to tell you that story tonight. Of course, at that time, I wasn't aware of these changes were going to happen. I was just trying to get away from this monster who was after me in the race of my life. It was the race of my life, as it turned out. tonight we're going to tell that story. And I'm not going to make you run laps. I know a lot of you were worried that, oh my God, Kathrine's going to make me get out here and run. You ran this morning. I hope all of you did. Thank you very much for that. But I'm going to tell you a story not really about running. It is about running. But it's not about running. It's really a story about vision, and it's about overcoming the impossible. And as I tell this story, I want to thank very much the College of New Rochelle, Adrian in particular for inviting me here, Amy for that wonderful introduction, the Dean and the Board of Trustees lady and the faculty, people who are here. But mostly I want to talk and thank the students for coming tonight. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you a little bit about my life, a lot about my career, but also I want you to use this as a talk about vision, of imagining your own future, of creating and of making positive change in the world. You're at a great, great time in world history right now. The world's a mess, okay? The world's a mess. That means we need you very badly. And you have lots and lots of options, not only to make your own personal history, to be a hero in your own life, but also to make really positive, good change around the world when the world needs it more than ever before. So I hope I give you a little bit of inspiration tonight. And then the best part of the talk, of course, always is the questions and answers at the end. So again, thank you for having me. My story really began on the streets of Boston, but before we began with the streets of Boston, how did I get there? How did I get to that moment at the Boston Marathon? And I'd like to say also that Mark has asked me, because he's videoing tonight, to stay at the podium. This is hard for me because I'm a very mobile person. I want to walk the stage. I'm always ready to move. So I'm going to be sitting here and I'll probably be making a lot of noise, Mark, and throwing my hands around, but bear with me, guys, okay? How did I begin to get to that streets of Boston? Okay, when I was about 12 years old, I really wanted to be a cheerleader. That was the big thing on offer at my high school. And my dad was a little concerned because he said, you know, honey, he said, you should really play field hockey. You have a field hockey team at your school. And he said, cheerleaders cheer for people. He said, you need people to cheer for you. Life is to participate, not to spectate. Now, it's a hard thing to even imagine, you know, so a guy, you know, in the late 50s, early 60s saying such a thing to his daughter, but my dad was a huge positive influence on me. Now, I love telling the story because all of us are going to have interaction with other little kids sometime in our lives, and maybe even you still as a young person, but you're going to have kids of your own, or you have nieces and nephews, or you will, and cousins, and you never ever understand, and never should ever underestimate the power of the pearls of wisdom that you throw in front of those kids, okay? They need so much positive reinforcement. I'm going to say this several times tonight. Talent is everywhere. Talent is everywhere. It only needs an opportunity. And you need to give kids that encouragement and that opportunity because it makes all the difference in their lives. All right. So what my dad obviously saw that you know, there's a skinny little 12-year-old with frizzy hair who wore glasses. Sometimes things never change in your life. And he knew I was never going to make that cheer squad anyway, but he really wanted me to get out and run and bash the ball and play this field hockey. So he said, I'll tell you what, honey, he said, I know you think you can't do it, but I know you can. And if you went out and ran a mile a day, you'd get in shape to do it. I said, oh, Dad, a mile a day, thanks a lot. That's like climbing Kilimanjaro. He said, oh, no, you can do it. I know you could. And he helped measure off our yard, and it was 7 laps. We had a pretty big yard out in the country, and I started running these laps every day. And it was a Washington, D.C. summer when I started doing this. And for those of you who might not know Washington, D.C., it's like a swamp, really. And it was very, very, very hot and humid. And I struggled and struggled and struggled to do this mile every day, but by golly, I did it. And by the autumn, when I tried out for the field hockey team, never having had a stick in my hand, I was one of the best players. What did I have? I had conditioning, right? But I didn't know that. At 12 years old, I thought it was magic. And I just want to tell you, I've been running for 50 years, and every day it's still magic, okay? Fitness is magic, and it never leaves you. And I said, I'm not going to make you go out and run laps tonight, but I am going to try to leave you before the night is over also with a very important fitness message, even if you're not an athlete yourself or plan to be an athlete. All right. What happened is, of course, is that from the field hockey experience, I played then basketball, I had the courage to play lacrosse, I played all kinds of sport. But the thing that always stuck with me was the sense of invincibility that I had from the running every day. I ran every day even though I played those other sports. And all through high school, in the tempestuous times of high school, we all remember those, I had a victory under my belt that nobody could take away from me, that gave me courage to do all kinds of other things, all right? And it is amazing what fitness can do, or what accomplishment can do. It makes you feel great about tackling anything that's new and unknown. But I did a whole lot of things, but one of the things, important part of this history is that I wanted to be a writer. And I kind of harbored this fantasy and used to covet my copy of Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger and would read that. I love J.D. Salinger. And then I loved E.E. Cummings. I loved T.S. Eliot. I loved W.B. Yeats. And of course, I thought then, if you're going to be a great writer, you'd have to sign your name with your initials. So I started signing my name, K.V. Switzer. Now listen up, it's an important part of this history. All right. K.V. Switzer it was. And also, if you look at how my name is spelled, you see there's no E in the Kathrine. Kathrine is usually K-A-T-H-E-R-I-N-E. My dad misspelled my name on my birth certificate. He was a little excited. Didn't spell too well anyway, but he misspelled my name. And so constantly I grew up with my name being misspelled. So I had a name that was spelled wrong to begin with that was always misspelled when people corrected it. And I got really sick of this. And so K.V. Switzer it was from age 12 on. And I decided that I would be a sports writer for my high school newspaper, all right? And I decided all through my high school career that that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a journalist. And by golly, by the time I got to university, I went to Syracuse University and studied journalism because they had one of the best journalism schools in the country, all right? Now you can imagine the transition then to Syracuse after high school of having sports and being encouraged and being able to play, and which is very unusual actually for the 60s because this is pre-Title IX. We'll also talk about Title IX a little bit because it's much confused. But anyway, when I got to Syracuse University, big powerhouse school, right? Ice hockey, football, Larry Zonka, Floyd Little, all these names that my generation would understand. And I know most of you guys weren't born 42 years ago, and that most of your mothers weren't even born 42 years ago. Thanks a lot. This story has more resonance now than it ever had. But at Syracuse, they had all these powerhouse scholarships in sports for guys, but for girls, nothing. For the women, nothing. We had play days. We had intramurals. And it was like, I thought, golly, when you grow up, are you supposed to not play sports anymore? I said, I'm not going to worry about it. Obviously, other women don't get it. I get it. I'm going to continue to run. Running is something I can do by myself. And I decided, wow, I'll even go out and talk to the men's track coach, and maybe I can run on the men's team. So I showed up at practice one day, talked to the coach, and said, I'd like to run on the men's team. And he barely contained himself and laughed so hard. And he said, well, look, I want to be fair here. You cannot run officially on the men's track team, cross-country team, because it's against NCAA rules. But we would certainly welcome you if you want to come work out with the team, knowing full well I'd never show up. Well, of course I showed up. That's the secret of my success, like Woody Allen said. So I showed up, and I was a little worried because, as Dr. Bass said, the 60s was a time of incredible tumult, and it was the birth of the feminist movement. Betty Friedan had just written The Feminine Mystique. There was a huge movement for women to be served in men's restaurants and clubs and bars, which I didn't understand at all. Like, why would anybody want to go to McSorley's bar in New York and sit there? Jeez. Anyway, so I know that laugh had to come from somebody in my name. But anyway, I thought these guys were going to say, oh, what's this woman doing here, She's in our face like, so many women are today. But when I got out there, the guys said, oh, it's great to have a woman here. It's terrific. You're welcome, and we're very motivational. One guy in particular came running over to me, and he goes, I've been working out with the team for 30 years, and we've never had a girl. And it was this guy by the name of Arnie Briggs, who was the unofficial track coach, assistant track coach. He was unofficial because he was really the university mailman. And the only reason he was still out there wounded and lame. His knee was bad, his Achilles were gone, but he had run with the team, training with the team for 30 years after he did his mail route at the university. And he was one of those guys from World War II who came back really fit from running and training for World War II, loved running, stuck with it, and became the upstate New York marathon champion. So he had run marathons. Now this is something I'd heard about. Oh my God, a marathon, 26 miles, 385 yards of glory. Someday I've got to do a marathon. Well, nothing would do, but Arnie would started telling me about his marathon adventures, and he had run 15 Boston marathons. To me, that's right up there with the Olympian gods, right? And we started running together. Now, how could this ancient guy, he was really old, I gotta tell you, he was 50. And even with the bad knee and the bad Achilles, he could run with me because I was so slow. He felt really sorry for me. The guys would go off training, I'd get lost every day. And Arnie would start running with me and show me how to go over the course. Well, here we were, 19-year-old girl, 50-year-old guy. He'd lost his legs, but he still had all the cardiovascular. I had no cardiovascular, I had plenty of strength. So we limped along together, me going, and Arnie yapping away. And he yapped the whole way, and he told me these stories of the Boston Marathon. Well, you get the picture. There are 15 Boston Marathons in 2 weeks. We've gone through the whole series, and we began again like a loop film. And after weeks and months of training, I could tell the stories better than Arnie could tell the stories. One night, for those of you who know upstate New York, you know how bad it is. There was something like 9.5 feet of snow that year, all right? One night in a blizzard just before exams, Arnie went on again about another Boston Marathon story. And you know how you're irritated right before the exam, you're tired, you haven't slept for days, and you didn't want to work out that night anyway, and now it's a blizzard, you're still out there running 10 miles, and you say, what the hell am I doing out here? I'm a crazy person, right? And Arnie starts in on another Boston Marathon story, and I snapped at him, and I said, oh, Arnie, let's just quit talking about the damn Boston Marathon and run it. And he said, wow, he said, a woman can't run the Boston Marathon. And I said, what? And he said, a woman can't do it. And I said, what do you mean a woman can't do it? We're running 10 miles in a blizzard, and I can't run a marathon? And he said, no, you know, with women, they fall apart as the race gets longer, and they just don't have the endurance, and he was getting really upset. And I said, what are you talking about? And I suddenly realized what had been happening down at the post office, you know, that people had seen Arnie and I out running every afternoon together, and they were really giving him, teasing him a lot, saying, hey, Arnie, you know, that girl's going to get big legs. She's going to get hair on her chest, Arnie. She's going to turn into a man. Her uterus is going to fall out, Arnie. Never have kids, you know. And that was the prevailing myth, like Dr. Bass said. It was actually worse than like having enough strength for your reproductive responsibilities. It was really whispered about that you know, if you did anything arduous, you were going to turn into a man. You know, that was really bad. Oh, well, why didn't I believe these myths when I was growing up? I heard them all the time. You know, my girlfriends would say, my parents say you're going to get big legs if you keep running, you know? And I laughed. I had to laugh so hard, you know, or, you know, you won't have babies when you grow up or something. I thought it was ridiculous because I came from great pioneering stock. I had my ancestors, the women in my family, went out with the wagon trains and they would stop and have babies along the way. So don't tell me that we didn't have strength and endurance, you know? It just didn't make sense. Plus I had a dad that encouraged me. But here was poor Arnie, you know, hearing the myth. Now he was really vexed. Nobody else would run with Arnie in the snow in Syracuse, just me. So he didn't want to lose me as a training partner, but he didn't know how far we could go. We argued. We stood in the road in the blizzard and I said, we've got a problem with our friendship, Arnie, if you don't believe a woman can do this. And he said, look, I just don't believe any woman could ever do it. Maybe you could, because you got all the strength. And I said, well, you know, you're really wrong, because throughout history, there have been other women who have run marathons. And he was quite shocked. I said, there have been about 6 since 1896. There have been about 6, not many, including one at Boston the year before, who jumped out of the bushes and ran the race. And when I said that, Arnie exploded. He said, no dame ever ran no marathon. And I said, then you've lost a training partner. And he said, wait a minute. He said, if you'd show me that you could do it, I'd be the first person to take you to Boston. I said, yes. Okay? trained our brains out for weeks and months, and we had hills, ups and downs, and all kinds of, spits and starts. But then finally came the time, we were going to do the full 26 miles in practice. We started in the morning, it was going to take us all day. And when we were coming in now for our finish of the 26-mile course that we had laid out, Arnie said, I don't believe it, you're going to do it, you look great. I said, I feel great. He said, wow, that's just amazing. I said, I feel too great. I said, I think we've mismeasured the course. He said, no, it's long, it's long. I said, no, Arnie, we got to know, when we go to Boston, barring anything happening, I can run the 26 miles. I feel really great. Let's run another 5 miles. He said, you can run another 5 miles? And I said, well, can't you? And he goes, I guess so. So another 5-mile loop. We did our another 5-mile loop. Now it's going to be a 31-mile workout. And a mile from the finish, I was talking to Arnie, and I realized he was incomprehensible. I looked over at him. He was as gray as our warm-up suit. His eyes were pinwheels. His hair was kind of standing on end. He was weaving all over the road. I said, oh my God, he's out. He's out on his feet. And I said, come on, Arnie, put my arm through his. I said, come on, 1 more mile, we can do this. 1 more mile, we can do this. And we got back to the parking lot, 31 miles, where the car was parked. And I threw my arms around him. I said, we did it. We're going to Boston. And Arnie passed out. And when he came to, he said, women have hidden potential in endurance. Okay, what had we discovered? We had discovered something that this is the next piece of vision I want to give you, okay? We had discovered that none of those guys in the cross-country team wanted to come out and run more than 8 or 10 miles with us, okay? If they were too tired, they couldn't go the distance. I could go forever. And I didn't have the speed, I didn't have their power, but I had the endurance. And what do we know now about women's sports? That women have natural capacities of endurance, flexibility, balance. Men have speed, power, strength. It doesn't mean one athlete's better than the other. We just don't have all the sports yet for the women. And that's what's happening now. Finally, we're developing women's opportunities into their capabilities. And I want you to imagine what I am imagining, that if all of the things, the changes that happened in my lifetime, happen in your lifetime, what kind of sports are there going to be? 6-day races, ground traverses, already triathlons, already these things are happening. It's just let your mind imagine things. I mean, it's phenomenal. I mean, the triathlon was a barroom bet in the 80s, okay? It wasn't an event. It's now an Olympic event. I mean, it's just astonishing. So just let your mind go with what women's capabilities are all about, the kinds of sports we may be seeing or you may be developing, okay? So Arnie was so excited about this. He was so proud of me. True to his word, he came over to my dorm the next day, filled out the entry form. He was the team captain. Another guy from the cross-country team was going to come run with us, who never showed up for the long runs because he was always too drunk from the fraternity parties the night before. How he was ever going to do it, I'll never know. But anyway, I filled out the entry form. I got my medical certificate. Arnie got the travel permits. I paid my entry fee, $2. Really, very expensive in those days, staying at the Boston Marathon. It's a joke, guys. Come on, it's $210 now. Anyway, and I signed my name. Kathrine Switzer, okay? And that is a critical part of this. The entry form went into the officials at Boston, and they thought it was from Kurt, Carrie, or Kim, but certainly not from Kathrine. So I wasn't trying to defraud them, but that's how I signed my name. In the meantime, there was nothing on the entry form about gender, all right? People just assume a woman, her uterus is going to fall out, she's going to get hair on her chest. No woman would want to run the Boston Marathon. No woman in her right mind would ever be training for the Boston Marathon. So this was going to be a very unusual thing. Also, in the rule book, which we went through, there was nothing about gender in the marathon distance either. There was men's events, women's events, and then the marathon was a whole third category. So Arnie said, come on. He said, don't worry about this. You've done all your work, you've done all the training, and you're going to be really welcome at Boston. You know those guys are going to really love you there. All the guys had always loved me in running, so that was great. Okay, so ready to go to Boston. Now we're going to do a little side trip, which is the night after this long run, this 31-mile run, I had a drink at the college bar, the Orange, with my boyfriend, steady boyfriend, who was a graduate student and one of the assistant coaches at the university. And his name was Tom, and we called him Big Tom because he was an ex-All-American football player. He weighed 235 pounds and was now contender in the Olympic hammer throw. Do you know what the hammer is? You know, 16-pound ball of lead on a 3-foot wire and they wing it around their head. The guys that throw it are usually very big and usually not too tall, built low to the ground, and very fast and very, very tough. And he was a terrific athlete. Tom was a terrific athlete. I was in awe of him. He was a terrific athlete. The only problem with Tom is that he knew he was a terrific athlete. And he told everybody he was a terrific athlete. So anyway, we're at the bar having a beer, and he said, "How's the jogging going?" Right? And as slow as I am, I'm a runner. So I said, "The running is going fine." And I thought, "You better tell him, you know, he's your steady boyfriend, right?" So I said, in fact, it's going really well. In fact, Arnie and I are going to Boston in 2 weeks. We're going to run the Boston Marathon. And he said, "No, you're not." He said, "Boston Marathon's 26 miles. I said, 385 yards. Tom, yes, I know how far a marathon is. In fact, Arnie and I ran it today at practice. And I didn't dare tell him we ran 31 miles, okay? And he put his beer down for a moment, and he said, "Oh, okay, then I'm going to run the Boston Marathon too. I'm going to go up with you guys. I'll run the Boston Marathon too." I said, "Tom, I don't think so. You got to do some training. Marathon takes training." And he said, "If a girl can do it, I can do it." I said, "Tom, I think you could, because you're a really talented athlete. But you've never run more than a mile in your life. If a girl can do it, I can do it. Tom, you've got 235 pounds. You're going to carry over 26 miles. You've never trained more than a mile in your life. If a girl can do it, I can do it." "Okay, Tom. Okay, Tom." So Tom came with us, all right? Now, the next thing that happened in this is that we all went in the car together the night before the race. Arnie said, "Bring your oldest clothes. The weather could be terrible," and it was. It was sleeting and snowing, the worst conditions ever in the history of the Boston Marathon. It was 35 degrees, so the snowflakes came down, those big ones, because it's April, and they came down all slushy and got you all wet. So everything was wet, but more important to the point was, at the start of the race, all the people were dressed alike in gray, baggy warm-up suits, trying to stay warm. Now, all the guys knew I was a woman and came over to me, just like Arnie said they would, and said, "It's great that a girl is here. Oh, gosh, would you give me tips for my wife or my girlfriend? I'd love to get her started running." I was feeling so good. Arnie was so proud, you know. He's like, "She ran me into the ground," he said. And he was really showing off. He said, "She's going to run. It's going to be a great race." And Tom's going to start this stuff too. Okay. But at this point, I think it's best if Oprah Winfrey tells us this story. So let's hear from Oprah, and are you going to hit the lights, Adrian? I'd just like to thank the college in New Rochelle. They must have a great budget to teleconference Oprah in like that. So yeah, thank you. All right, now the story gets actually serious, okay? It's so funny in the retelling. At the time, you can imagine how traumatic it was. I mean, everybody had said, "You know, you're so welcome," and all of a sudden this bozo attacks me in front of the press truck, and the cameras are just buzzing, and, you know, I'm so embarrassed. I'm so terrified. And there's that split second when I wanted to quit, walk off the course, just cover my face, you know? But it was only a split second. I said, "Oh, no, if I even do that, even come close to doing that, everybody's going to say, see, women are always barging into places they're not welcome, and they can't do it anyway." They'd say it's a publicity stunt, they prank, and I knew that to be taken seriously, I was going to have to finish the race. And for those of you who aren't marathoners, you've got to understand the marathon races. Part of the allure of the marathon is that it's a very diabolical race. It's hard. Anything can happen. You get blisters, you bonk, you get exhausted, dehydrated, diarrhea, all these sort of things that can put you out of the race couldn't happen to me, all right? It just wasn't possible. I had to finish the race, no matter what. So that's when I said to Arnie, I said, "Arnie, I don't know where you stand in this, but I've got to finish this race. Even if I finish it on my hands and my knees, I've got to finish this race." Now, how a 20-year-old girl, with all that happening to her, had the presence of mind to say that, I don't know, all right? But let me just say this. People say, "Oh, you were destined, Kathrine, to have that happen, to make something happen, and it was meant to be." I don't believe that. I think destiny is one thing. Okay? I think destiny is largely getting the job done. Okay? I think destiny is staying the course, not quitting. Almost always, if you look at things that have happened that are quote-unquote destiny, it has to do with just getting the job remember that when you're struggling sometimes to get through your university work, and your first jobs especially, and family and everything. It's really very tough, but it's usually just staying the course and getting the job done, okay? So I put my head down and I said, we're going to do this. Okay. All of a sudden then now, this is quite dramatic, right? Big Tom turns to me, right? And he says, you're getting me in all kinds of trouble. I said, what do you mean I'm getting you in all kinds of trouble? He said, I hit an official, and they saw my number, and they took my picture, and they're going to look up and find out who I am, bozo, and I'm going to be kicked out of the AAU, the Amateur Athletic Union, and I will not make the Olympic team, and it's all your fault. I said, geez, now I'm crying, and everybody, now we're having a boyfriend-girlfriend fight in the middle of the Boston Marathon. Everybody, and then he says the worst thing. He said, besides that, you run too slow anyway. It's like a knife in the heart when you took off. So I just kind of had my head down and I said, just relax, just blow it off, just go. Just don't worry about it. It'll be fine. Let him go, let him go. So anyway, let him go. All right. The marathon is an interesting event also because it gets harder as it goes on, right? And Boston in particular is strange because it's the first half is downhill and the second half is uphill. So along about 13 miles, I noticed that there was an orange Syracuse University sweatshirt walking up a hill in front of us after a while, and I realized it was, Big Tom, and that I was going to have another crisis yet when I caught him because I was catching him very, very quickly. No matter how slowly you run, you're going to catch somebody who's walking very quickly. And all of a sudden, I was alongside of him and surprised him, right? And all of a sudden, he starts jogging again, right? Like I hadn't been watching him for a while, right? And he goes, oh, and he starts, he said, gosh, he said, I'm tired. I said, yeah, it's a long way. If you're walking at 13 in a marathon, get a taxi, really. And anyway, he said, walk with me. I said, I can't walk with you, Tom. As slow as I'm going, I have got momentum. So pretty soon I'm away from him, and I turned around, I was running backwards, and I said, hey, look, there's a sweep truck that comes along, picks up the wounded in the lane. You'll probably get it back, Tom, because you're really talented. But if you don't, get the sweep truck and we'll see you at the finish. And then I was gone, gone. And then after, I don't know how long it was, but a couple of hills later, I heard this voice from a great distance shout, I'd never leave you. An interesting thing also happens in the marathon and any long activity, whether you're a swimmer or a biker, or any time you do a long distance activity, you can't go a long time like that without and stay angry, okay? You can't stay angry, you gotta let it go. And I often say if the kettle boils down enough, the sediment at the bottom is going to solve the problem for you, but the anger goes. And you come to solutions. I mean, I swear running has been my savior through all kinds of life crises and given me my most creative ideas, because at the bottom of that kettle, if you go long enough, this amazing, amazing illumination occurs. So now I'm along about Heartbreak Hill, which is about 21 miles, and I'm suddenly thinking, why aren't other women in this race? I'd stopped being angry at Jock Semple. He was just ignorant, okay? I said, why aren't other women in this race? Well, they believe those myths. Why didn't you believe those myths? Well, I had Dad, and I had Arnie, and then I thought, no, it's because I had an opportunity. They didn't have an opportunity. They never had an opportunity. So by the time they got to 20, somebody at 10 told them to stop climbing trees and to still play with dolls and not to run and all that kind of stuff. By the time they got to 20, it never occurred to them to do something as challenging as running a marathon because they were afraid. And I said, well, they're afraid because they've never had an opportunity to not be afraid, to do something challenging. So I said, right, I'm going to create those opportunities for them. I didn't know how. I thought I'd be like Johnny Appleseed and work with my club and do that. And the other thing I decided at that moment is that I knew I was going to finish, as you heard, the first marathon in 4 hours and 20 minutes, which is a completely acceptable time in the marathon now, but then it was considered a jogging time because anybody who really ran a marathon usually did it, if they were under 4 hours, if they were considered to be runners. And so I knew I was going to just take a lot of help for being a 4 hour and 20 minute runner, and I needed to get my credibility, and I also wanted to explore myself as an athlete. So I said, when you finish this race, you're going to create opportunities and you're going to become a better athlete. It was fabulous. By the time I finished the race, I felt like light as a feather. no longer angry, and I had a life plan. It was really amazing. It's really was quite astonishing how one incident like that could really lay it out for you. When we got to the finish, we were met by some very, very angry journalists who stood around in the rain and the slush all day waiting for the girl to finish the race. We answered questions, and we were really waiting for Tom. We're waiting for the sweep truck. Where is it? Nobody ever heard of the sweep truck. We couldn't find Tom anywhere. We were about ready to give up. We waited about an hour and a half. And by that time, we had rigor mortis. And we were just getting ready to leave the area when all of a sudden, this Hulk came down around the last corner of the course and lumbered down the street toward the finish line. And I said, nobody recognized him. He lost 20 pounds, right? And I said, it's Tom, it's Tom. We all started cheering, come on, Tom, come on, come on. And so he goes, and he finished the race. Has like this. He sounded like he was having an asthma attack. He said, that damn sweep truck never came. Tom and I got engaged that night. We got married the next year. We got divorced 5 years later. Never trust those endorphins, okay? Endorphins are amazing for a lot of reasons, but do not make any major commitments when you're high on endorphins, all right? All right, now we got to get the story moving here, okay? Becoming an athlete is the easiest part of the story. Hard work always works, okay? Whatever you're going to do, hard work always works. There's no such thing as junk miles. There's no such thing as junk work. It all pays off, okay? Makes you very tough. I trained my brains out. I trained up to finally 110 miles a week. I ran 35 marathons. I won the New York City Marathon. And by the way, Charlie McCabe, put your hand up, Charlie, the first sponsor for manufacturing marathons. So that's amazing. He was a very, very pioneering guy, and he took the race from Central Park and took it on the streets of New York for the first time. So Charlie, legend in history, will always remember you, and you have a great legacy. So thank you very much. And it's an honor to be a winner in your race. Okay, I won the New York City Marathon. As I say, it took 35 times. I improved from 4:20 to 2:51. The time is still near Olympic qualifying time now. And I am not talented. I can work really hard, but I am not a talented athlete. I just believed I could work hard enough to improve. And when I did that, it only reinforced my desire to create opportunities for other women, because I knew there was enormous talent out there that didn't even know it had talent. And it, again, only needed that opportunity, all right? By the way, you guys, when you think about your abilities, you say, oh yeah, Kathrine says that. She says she has no talent. Trust me on this, okay? You're the worst judge of your own capability, all right? You absolutely are the worst judge of your own capability, whether it's academics or sports or whatever. The only way you're going to explore that is to try it and do it, all right? And keep pushing the boundary, and you will amaze yourself. Hard work always, always pays off. And so I just really want to remind you of that. The capacity for human achievement is beyond anything you can imagine, all right? I mean, when you look at some of the accomplishments of some people, you say, how did they ever do that? Well, maybe you could do it too, okay? It's beyond your imagination, but try to imagine it, all right? All right, so then the drive began to really get women's marathon event into the Olympics. First, we had to get official in the Boston Marathon. We did that in 1972 with a lot of legislative work. Can you imagine they banned us for 5 years? Anyway, after I ran, I was expelled from the Amateur Athletic Union for running with men, for running more than a mile and a half, for fraudulently entering the race by signing my initials, even though men did that, and for running without a chaperone, all right? Just amazing, okay? But we ran anyway. We just showed up and ran, and pretty soon the press were on our side, and people were getting embarrassed, but except for the officials, absolutely towed the line. Finally, we legislated the officialness into the Boston Marathon, and of course the race director who threw me out 5 years before had steam coming out of his ears when he had to welcome me into the race. But the nice end of this story is he saw how well I ran, gave me a big kiss at the start and finish line, which is his way of saying he was sorry, although he never said he was sorry. And the New York Times printed that picture the next day in the paper and said, the end of an era, which meant if Jock Semple could welcome Kathrine Switzer in the Boston Marathon, women are really on the road to success. It ends a huge era of discrimination. but also ending a huge era of discrimination that year. That was in April. In June, Title IX was enacted, the Title IX amendment to the Constitution, and maybe some of you younger people don't know this. This was an educational amendment which mandated the equality of education in any institution in the United States that received federal funding. That's putting it simply, okay? And most of us assumed it was to get women at last admitted equally into universities and colleges, and to scholarship opportunities in graduate school, which had really been very tough for women to get into, particularly law and engineering, chemistry, things like that that were not traditionally female. So we had equal opportunity there, but it also applied to sports. And since 1972, I don't think anybody would disagree, for all its flaws, it has transformed our way of thinking and of women's and men's sense of limitation about women. There isn't a young girl growing up today that doesn't believe she doesn't have an opportunity in both education and in sports in this country, and that is because of Title IX. So that's a very important thing for you to be studying, for those of you who maybe are into social sciences and law, and to look at that amendment. Then the drive began to get the women's marathon in the Olympic Games. Still, the longest distance in the Olympic Games was a mere 800 meters, 2 laps of the track. You know, anything arduous, you know, your uterus is going to fall out. So getting the marathon into the Olympic Games was going to be very, very difficult. I started with my club, organizing events, getting sponsorships. I remember going out and talking to used car dealers and getting kind of beat up trophies for the awards, and trying to do a lot of publicity for women. But then in 1972, after I graduated from graduate school, I had an opportunity to work for the New York Daily News as a reporter at the Munich Olympics. I convinced them that they should actually hire me, since I knew everybody on the teams and track teams, and I went over to cover the games in Munich. Well, what a games it was. Okay, you know, that was the one where the Israeli athletes were massacred, and it was a terrible Olympics, but it was also a wonderful Olympics. It was wonderful from the point of view, for me, in terms of the fact that I was there, even though I witnessed to something horrible. It was a wonderful learning experience. You know, not all learning experiences are nice, okay? But I learned how politicized the Olympics are, and that the smallest players in the Olympic Games are the athletes. The biggest players are not just the IOC and the governing bodies in the different countries, but are the sponsors. Suddenly I was there, and I was trying to get the women's marathon in the Olympic Games, and it wasn't going to be committees that are going to do it. It wasn't going to be letter writing that was going to do it. It wasn't getting trophies from used car dealers that was going to do it. It was Deutsche Bank, BMW, it was Mercedes, Kodak. It was million-dollar sponsors. And I said, if I could get a sponsor like that, I'm going to get women on the map, because I'm going to create the events. I'm going to get us on television, and nobody can deny us anymore. I came back and started writing proposals, and I wrote one for the world's largest cosmetics company, Avon. And by golly, they took my proposal and they hired me. It was one of those moments, like, what do I do now? Well, I knew exactly what to do, but I mean, it was absolutely breathtaking for me, because we were literally off and running with a pilot series of races in the United States that immediately caught on like wildfire to this, because it's a huge multinational company, our different divisions around the world. And we were putting on races all over the world, eventually in 27 countries, 400 races, over 1 million women. And I was in charge of this program. And that was all from that dream, which is creating the opportunity. It was absolutely stunning. And in each of those countries where we had to train people how to set up toilets in time of the race and clear the traffic. And then I jump on the pony and go to the next country and teach them all again how to do this. Breaking ground in these countries, sometimes for the first ever road race they've had, but more importantly, the first ever women's sports event in public that they've ever had. Places like the Philippines, Malaysia, Thailand, Japan. Okay, can you imagine an industrialized nation like Japan having nothing for women? Well, you should, because the women are still second-class citizens in Japan. And so it was very, very difficult to convince them to let us close the road and put on a race. We did it anyway. They wouldn't let us have a race longer than 5 kilometers, 3.1 miles. It wouldn't let any woman under 16 run. But finally, when the race was such a huge success, they were embarrassed enough to then start doing it themselves. And of course, when people do that, they often can do it better than you can do it. So it took off in Japan in a very, very big way. I could go on from country to country to country, but I can tell you every country had a different social problem or challenge with women. In Malaysia, a third of the population was Muslim. You know, we had 5,000 women come out for the event there, and they were wrapped from head to toe, and they held up their najibs and they ran anyway, okay, in 110-degree heat. It was fabulous. In Brazil, when I went down there for the first time for a race, I met with the head of the athletic federation, and I said to him, look, I really need you to come out and fire the starting gun for our race. He goes, your race is not going to be successful. The women in Brazil are so feminine. And I said, there's nothing unfeminine about running. And he said, I mean, have anybody here been to Rio? They're all naked down on the beach in these little pasty things playing beach volleyball. Come on, don't tell me they don't like sports. It's amazing. So anyway, he said, I know I have to do it because I'm head of the federation, but my wife will not come with me, and I will not permit my daughter to come. Okay, so he came. He said, you probably have 100 women show up. He had 10,000 women. As my husband tactfully says, you can't ignore 10,000 women in shorts running through the streets of Rio de Janeiro. Anyway, so the head of the federation was kind of embarrassed. I said, oh, Senor, we just couldn't have done this without you. Right? And he goes, oh, yes, well, thank you very, very much. Well, both of us aren't stupid. I needed his vote with the International Olympic Committee. Okay? He had a program for women that made him look really good, and he was on a global TV every night. So that was fantastic. But who are the real winners here? The women. The women. Okay? So I went from country to country to country to talk to these guys at the different federations and got them on board. And most of them were not quite as cantankerous as the guy from Brazil. But once they saw it and believed it, they saw the opportunity was there. In a place like Brazil, let me just tell you how astonishing it was, because with those 10,000 women, there were women in that race, several hundred in fact, who didn't even own a pair of shoes. And I'm not talking like Nikes or Reeboks here. I'm talking about poor without shoes. Okay, so if you're so poor you cannot afford a pair of shoes, and somebody gives you a t-shirt and a medal and says you are somebody, guess what? You are somebody. And it is a phenomenal thing when somebody gives you that kind of validation. And those women somehow managed to write to us afterwards. Many of them got jobs, somehow got an education. Their lives completely changed by putting one foot in front of the other. And that's really what I want to pass on to you. So how phenomenal that was from country to country. Finally, in one big marathon in London in 1980, we pulled together 27 countries, five continents, and exceeded the Olympic requirement of, 27 countries, 5 continents, exceeding the Olympic requirement of 25 countries and 3 continents. The Olympics could no longer deny us. This was 1980. And had to vote us into the Olympic Games for the 1984 Games. That race, by the way, cleared downtown London streets for the first time in history for a sports event, and then became what is now the Great London Marathon, one of the greatest marathons in the world. And I always take great, great pride in knowing that it was actually women who closed those streets first, for the first time, and went on to be the design model for a very, very, very great race. When the Olympics happened in 1984, by that time I was still an executive with Avon, but by that time I was also a television commentator. Again, ABC suddenly realizing there was a women's marathon in the Olympic Games said, oh, we don't have anybody that knows anything about the women's marathon. I put up my hand again, you know? What did I say? I'm like Woody Allen, you know, disturbed, but the secret of my success is that I showed up. That's another thing I want you guys to think of in your futures, okay? Show up, you know? That's 90% of winning, okay? Show up. Anyway, so now I'm a commentator, and I'm doing the commentary of the first ever women's marathon in the Olympic Games. And I'm in a little blazer and everything, okay? And the race is actually over now. I'm in the studio. I'm going to tell you a story. I'm reading from my book here. In the studio, the race is over. Joan Benoit has won. The American has won the race, the first gold medal. Greta Weitz, 9-time winner of the New York City Marathon, was second. And Rosa Moura from Portugal was third. And I hear in my earpiece, I hear the producer say, he said, He says, up the music, roll the credits. Now, the credits are rolling, you know, the Rocky music is playing. And I say, as this is happening, I say to myself, I always knew that nobody would understand how important this is until the first woman comes through the tunnel and into the Olympic Stadium. That's when 90,000 people will get it. But it's more. It's when 2.2 billion people watching television will get it. And tradition-bound households from America to Afghanistan, where women have faces covered and are not allowed in education, every culture knows that 26.2 miles or 42.2 kilometers is a long race. Both men and women have walked or bicycled or even ridden a donkey over the distance, and they know it is far. And here are women running it with strength, courage, speed, and grace. In one dramatic race, they showed the world the limitlessness of women's heroic capability. And in my earpiece, then I hear the producer once again, he said, okay, we're Roll Benoit finished. Here she is again, rapid, she's entering the tunnel. And we see that figure of Joan Benoit running through the streets of LA, and she's heading to that Olympic tunnel, that moment of destiny, right? And I say she's the perfect symbol now for much of women's history, as once more we see her enter the darkness, obscured for a few seconds, and then stride out of the darkness to run powerfully and beautifully into a shimmering stadium, to a welcome that reverberates to the ocean. Now originally, that's how the first edition of my book ended, and everybody screamed and said, you can't stop in 1984, what happened then, what happened then? So just now, let me give you 3 or 4 bullet points. 25 years later, okay, 25 years later, 2009. Already, there are now more women runners in North America than there are men. In my lifetime. If that's happened in my lifetime, what is going to happen in your lifetime? Think about it. Think about it, okay? All right? The Women's Olympic Marathon, contested 7 times, has become now a glamour event, as has women's participation in the big city marathons. These women ignite public acclaim and have created a whole new class, the professional woman runner. Prize money has changed more than the sport. It has changed women's social and financial status globally. To me, I mean, that's the core of the feminist argument. It's economic. If you have money, if you can support yourself, you're going to get better status, okay? Unfortunately, it's not easy, all right? But the women's running has changed this phenomenally. Because, for instance, in Africa, the women runners go back to their villages. They build schools, they sanitize water, they drill wells, they inoculate the kids. They are no longer second-class citizens. I was in Kenya this year, and I've been working with the Kenyan and the Ethiopian athletes so much over the years. A lot of times people say, oh, another Kenyan, another Ethiopian wins the race, you know, because like we can't beat the Kenyans or the Ethiopians. Never, ever begrudge them their prize money. When you go back and see how they have completely changed the social fabric of their city, their villages, and particularly the women, it is absolutely phenomenal and it is such an incredible harbinger for the future. Japan, as I told you, they had had no global heroines in their whole history until Olympic marathoners Yuko Aramori and Naoko Takahashi. Now, a woman marathoner in Japan is a rock star. I'm not kidding. They walk down the street, they're absolutely mobbed. Rock star status. England's Paula Radcliffe. If you can imagine, she rewrote world notions of women's capability when she ran a world best time of 2 hours and 15 minutes, and then went on to be a mother, barely breaking stride and smashing several old barriers at once. Actually, many of the top women marathoners are mothers. There's another interesting thing that you guys are going to explore, which is why women are better athletes after childbirth. Makes perfect sense, right? You know, stay up all night and change diapers, you're going to get good. Okay. Joan Benoit Samuelson, the gold medalist winner of that first marathon, still runs and sets age group records. Lots of ordinary women start running at 60, 70, and even 80, proving that age is no limit to success. So there we are, 25 years later. Again, I just want to ask you as students and educators, what are the next 40 years going to bring? I mean, it is going to be phenomenal when we discover more and more about our capabilities, when more and more opportunities open. You guys make those happen. Talent is everywhere. It only needs an opportunity. And as we discover much more in terms of our own health, our own health capabilities, let me leave you with just one health message, is that Almost all of the diseases that we now have in the world, in the industrialized nations, certainly in the United States, are preventable diseases, all right? Your biggest killer, by the way, is not going to be cancer, breast cancer or prostate cancer. It's heart disease. Heart disease will kill 45% of the people in this room, and it is preventable. Half of the cases of all heart disease are preventable from exercise. 30 minutes of walking a day. I'm not talking about being a marathon runner. I'm talking about going out and walking for 30 minutes a day. So you've got your future in your own hands here. Diabetes is going wild. Obesity is out of control. 30-minute walk will cure all of that instantly. All right? So what I want you guys to do is to take your own health and your own fitness very, very seriously. I want you to pass it on. And I guess I just would like to add and end on this, the one last thing that my father, who was a terrific inspiration to me, said you can't always thank everybody who's helped you in your life, okay? And all of you have people to thank, else you wouldn't be here. But the best way of saying thank you is to pass it on. So the thing I'd like to leave the students in particular, the educators are already doing this, that's their job, is passing this on to you. So you pass it on to the next generation. The world needs you very badly. Thank you so much. No, never did I feel I was doing anything wrong as a woman. I felt bold, brave, strong, very happy. You know, fitness makes you feel like, you know, king of the hill. I must say, I got to say this. It's in my book. The toughest people to win over in the 60s and 70s were other women. And I've forgiven them all. I love them dearly. But boy, they were hard. And I often say the only people who ran me off the road were women. And I remember having this argument with my coach once, and I said, "What's the matter with them?" And he said, "Oh, honey," he said, "they're just jealous." Yeah. And I said, "All they have to do is put on a pair of shoes." And he said, "You know that, but they don't know that yet." So that was part of my set. If they could only feel as good as I feel. People are afraid, you know, and I just wanted to give them that sense of empowerment that I had. Second part of the question, how did it define me as a person? After the Boston Marathon, it was very tough for me. I was pilloried, I received piles of hate mail. I received wonderful fan mail too, don't get me wrong, but it was a polarizing experience. It was the first time I realized that people can hate you and love you at the same time, because it's different people, right? And it defined me as a person because it gave me even more strength. It said, okay, all right, now I'm going to, it is incumbent on me to create these opportunities and to show people how good fitness and women's equality can be. So, you know, having known nothing about the feminist movement, I suddenly became one, you know. But again, never in your face, just trying to win people over slowly and create those opportunities. But yes, it was very defining, and for many other ways, which I've told everybody. Thank you, it's a good question.
And my second question to you is, as a journalist yourself, how does it feel to report on someone who has broken a record or accomplished something described as almost impossible in sports, knowing that you yourself had once been reported on in the same way?
You know, when I do the coverage of the major marathons, and usually in the New York City Marathon, I'm in a motorcycle alongside of the elite women. I got to tell you, it's the best seat in the house. You've got a But I always regard that as an honor or privilege. And when there's a record, I always think, how much faster can they go? What is the limit? For a long time it was, I was wondering when they were going to be starting to break through more, but now it's always the wonder of the experience. So it's always thrilling, never, ever, ever boring, just absolutely magnificent. Sometimes as a journalist, the hardest thing though is always the technology you're wrestling with, particularly with television, because you get breakup, you can't hear your call, that kind of stuff, and that always freaks me out, because you want to do a good job, and you sound like an idiot half the time. But anyway, we try our best. Well,
Hello.
hello.
My name is Olga Mitroska, and I'm a senior at the College of Rochelle. I was born and raised in Poland and moved to the United States 8 years ago, and I have been on various swim teams since I was 9, including the senior swim team and the tennis team as well. In early May this year, I actually ran a 10K in Long Island, first time. And my mom encouraged me to do it when she was 50. She ran a half marathon during that time, and she's currently training for a full marathon.
Great.
And I have 3 questions for you. In your book, an acknowledgement, part of the book you mentioned that if a name appears in the book, it's an automatic thank you. Well, how about the people who discouraged you, and were they?
Some of the people who discourage me are also in the book. People often say, why did you wait till you're 60 to write your autobiography? Well, when you're 60, you can be outrageous. You know what? You can wear red lipstick again. You can be really outrageous. And also, a lot of the tragedies of your life become funny. And so, one of the things I did with the people who discouraged me in my book is I praised them highly. It was the best way of getting back, because, they know who they are. And so, I would either not mention them at all, okay, which is the ultimate insult, or I just was gracious to them. And you know what? And it's a very freeing experience. You don't carry around any baggage anymore. So that's one of the things I did with that.
Another question is, being an athlete myself, I must admit that it took me quite a while to figure out my best event. And actually those events changed over the time. Like currently it's 100 butterfly. But how was it that, did you know that running long distance was your thing?
Well, okay, that's a very valid question, especially then. How did I know long distance running was my thing? It's something I really fell in love with, and I had decided that, even if we never got official in the Boston Marathon or ever got into the Olympics, that it would be something that I would always do all my life. It's my sanity, my vanity, my creation, my creativity time, it's my religion, it's my everything. But I love field hockey, and if field hockey had been an Olympic sport when I was playing well, maybe all of this would be changed. You see? So also you choose your sport by the opportunities and the options you have. And there are plenty of musicians who would probably tell you that they really loved the cello, but they had to play the piano because that's all there was. And by the time they got to be, 30 and could afford their own lessons or something, it was too late. Didn't have the skills. So whatever. The interesting thing now, and that's what I tried to tell all of you and the audience, is imagine the sports that will be around even in 10 years that we can't even imagine now. I made that joke, I'm not sure you understood this when I said the triathlon was a barroom bet in the 80s. What it was 3 guys. One was a cyclist, one was a swimmer, and one was a runner. And they were arguing over who was a better athlete. And so they said, oh yeah, well, let's do all 3 of them. And then the Ironman triathlon was born. So that's how that began. And we're limited, as I say, only by our imagination. So what you can do, I don't know, maybe there's going to be something like a double marathon with gymnastics involved. I don't know, okay?
Last question. How would you encourage people to start running, exercise, or lead healthier lives? I mean, your book is enough encouragement to me, also your speaker now. But
not feel guilty about giving yourself the time. And women, by the way, are really bad about that because most women, whether it's genetic or whatever, I don't know, but we give everything away first. You know, the family, the house, we think we've got to do all of those things. You know, the dog comes first before we get out and do our own workout. And it's time for people to realize that the better you are for yourself, the better you are for everybody else. Okay, so you've got to take care of yourself first. But to start a program, you know, the best thing to do is if they say, I know I should walk 30 minutes a day. Well, I just don't have time. Well, you do have time. You have time to do anything in your life you really want to do. But to figure it out that you could walk 10 minutes in the morning when you get up, and you could walk 10 minutes at lunchtime, and you could walk 10 minutes with the dog when you get home at night. And that's your 30 minutes. Just, there's different ways of figuring it out. Figure it out. You can do that. But do start. The most important thing is start. And if you start and then you fall off the wagon, you say, oh, it's too late, never look back. Just put on your shoes and start again. That's what I always say. And another really good fitness tip, by the way, is get a buddy. If you have a buddy, you never keep your buddy waiting. So that'll get you out the door every time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Good questions.
Hi, my name is Suzanne Mariano. I'm a sophomore at college, and my major is nursing. I'm on the swim team here, and I grew up in Massachusetts. My question for you is, when creating programs for women in other countries, did you encounter any major uproars against it? And if so, was it more the government or netizens?
Well, I think I mostly addressed that, working in different countries. It was overcoming, you know, the governments weren't a problem. The athletic federations sometimes were a problem, but they also realized they were getting a gift from a major corporation that they maybe couldn't afford or hadn't thought of, so that ultimately, by working with them and making them look good, you know, then they came on side. Sometimes it's hard when people are being objectionable to make them look good and feel they're part of the process, but I needed to get the women's marathon in the Olympic Games. So, you know, that's the kind of the give and the take that we had. But I think the more difficult thing was convincing officials about the social appropriateness of women participating. And the women themselves, though, it was never, ever an issue. Women always wanted the opportunity. As I said, even those who had to have, you know, head and bodies completely covered, realized the importance of fitness and wanted to get out there and do something fun. So that was a matter of really careful publicity and going to schools, putting on clinics and how to run clinics and how and show people how they could do it. You can't just say to people, oh, like, there's a race, come and run. What we would do is start 10 or 11 weeks out with a simple running clinic and show them how to start walking and then how to run, how to jog, and how to work up their distance. So, you know, just sort of educating them to the whole process. And it really worked. Is that the only question?
Yes.
Yeah, one more?
No, that was it.
Oh, that was it? Okay, those are great questions, you guys. Thank you so much. Thank you.
We have questions. Do we have time for questions from the audience? Okay, any question? I'll take it. Yes?
How did you come to educate yourself on nutrition versus an athlete new to cross-country training, and then as a race director trying to set up all the stations, you know, in the new field?
Okay, you got to understand that Gatorade hadn't even been invented then.
Right.
And there was this whole theory that that you didn't take water when you ran, when you trained, even in a marathon, okay? Which is absolutely ridiculous. I think I was, if there's anything I was blessed with, was a great dose of common sense. And clearly, if you get thirsty, you should drink, right? And clearly, if you're going to go a long distance, you better get some fluid in you, or know of a place on the course where you can get the fluid. I was shocked in my first Boston Marathon that there were, well, believe me, I ran the Boston Marathon 8 times. And the 8 times I ran it, there never was a water station. There never were toilets. And the elites, for the elite athletes, they had like a tray of oranges or something like that. So I learned to set up my own crews and my own water stations and friends who met me at every like 5 to 10 mile point. And then I cussed the whole way. And I said, someday I'm going to organize a race properly, with right timing, with right measurements, with plenty of toilets, traffic control, and maybe most importantly, water and fluid stations. And then when sorry, no, it wasn't. It was the year after the Boston Marathon where I ran my best time, my 2:51. But having said that, I'm going to run a marathon next March. Yes. I didn't stop running marathons because I was injured or bored. It was because I had the opportunity to create a global program. And that kind of energy that's required to train for a marathon, I had to put into the program. And then I say now, you know, if I don't have to do a 20-mile run every Sunday, I can write another book. And that's true too, you know, because it takes a lot of concentrated space and time to write a book. But you know, it's interesting. There are events now that are so alluring and so interesting that I'm sort of jealous of having missed them when I was a good runner. So I want to run this marathon next March, which is practiced in New Zealand. And it's from one town to another over a mountain range of a totally environmentally protected land, and they only open it one day a year. And the only way you can see this land is to run this race to get over it. So I'm really wanting to do that. This year I've been running a lot of half marathons, and in June I ran a real showstopper for me, which was to run a half marathon in Kenya and to run at altitude and run with Kenyans. And I ran on a game reserve where in the morning they buzzed the lions and the rhinos off the race course with helicopters before the runners came through. So my husband said, it's okay if you're slow, honey, just don't be last. But it was astonishing experience. Now there are these colorful, wonderful events that didn't exist, and it's great to be able to run and enjoy nature and everything like I do every day.
That's
To now see the work.
the Bermuda Triangle race that I saw you.
Well, that's where
January.
Adrian and
Three
I.
races in 3 days.
Yes, Adrian and I met. Adrian and Walt and I met at this race in Bermuda, which is 3 races in 3 days. It's the street mile on Friday night, it's the 10K on Saturday, and a half marathon or a marathon on Sunday. And somebody challenged me to do that, and I thought, I'm going to have to get in shape. But amazingly, I did. And so, of course, there's going to be another book there, you know. Can an over 60 woman get back into shape again? Of course she can. But it's a study of one. Everything you do, by the way, you're going to find in your lives. You know, you think that it's not going to matter, but later you find that that goes to another project you're going to work on. Nothing is wasted. So, yes, it's very fun discovering these things again. Any questions? Any more questions? Yes?
What was the most compelling story or interaction you've had with a woman and all the experiences in other countries? You think?
Oh, God, there were so many.
Oh, it's fun.
I think probably, because I've told it a million times and it lingers, it's just that Brazil one.
Okay.
When they're